Good evening, everybody. I hope everyone is having a good Monday. We are going to be having open discussion tonight. I hope everybody, if you're working, has had a pretty good day at work. And if it was just the first day to your week, I hope it was a good first day. Hey, Claire. Hey, Xylee. Hey, Jean. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Just Britt. How is everyone doing? I hope everybody is having, like I already said, a good day. So I'm just going to try and be sure I have the chat pulled up. Give me just a second. I should have had this prepared, but I kind of lost a little bit track of time. So I pull all of this up before I go live. Sorry about that, guys. So make sure I'm on live chat. Okay, so today's open discussion, I put a poll up last Friday. You guys know typically on Fridays is when the polls go up for our open discussions. And I put some topics that were requested, which typically come with a little bit heavier of trigger warnings. So before we get started in talking about anything or anyone feeling vulnerable or wanting to discuss some of their experiences, please be warned. Mods, I'm going to ask that you guys regularly put in that this is a triggering topic. I'm also going to paste a number that I would like you guys to continue to provide. That is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So mods, if you guys could just make sure every once in a while someone is at least having it in the chat that this is a triggering topic and that number, I would greatly appreciate it. Just so everybody who maybe enters understands that we are talking about something that can be triggering and that they have a resource. That is, like I said, the national number for domestic violence. You can always, like I always refer to, you can always dial *211. That will bring you to United Way, and they can get you in contact with your local resources. Before we start talking too much about anything specific, I also want to say every area has their own kind of domestic violence shelters and safe places. And I'm pretty sure that the 800 number will link you with those resources. But if you're ever in a situation where you are unsafe, your family's unsafe, or you are pitted in a position that you don't think that you can get away from for whatever reason, there always is help. There's more help out there than you would realize. Feel free to reach out to someone, anyone, whether it's a hotline number or if it is a friend, someone that you can confide in, just to make sure there's others aware of whatever situation you are going through. Thank you for joining, Tina Corley. How are you? All right. So a few more people have entered, and I just want to say hi to everyone who's here so far. Hey, Leanne. Hey, Dottie. Good to see you. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Adele. Hey, Sunny D. Hey, Paula. Hey, Catherine. Hey, Christophan. Hey, Dina. Hey, I think I said hi to Paula, but hi again. Hey, Frank. Hey, Jolly. I hope everybody is having a pretty good day. So today, our topic that was voted on was domestic violence. I have pinned, which I can't remember who suggested that. Thank you for suggesting it. It is a pinned comment. This is a trigger warning topic. Also, there's a phone number if you find yourself or you know of anyone who is in a domestic violence relationship or situation. You can give them that number. You can call for yourself. Domestic violence is something that I would like to say is talked about, and it's talked about in a blanketed way as a society. There are classes and education out there, but it's reactive. And I've talked about this a lot. A lot of the community resources that do exist are either intervention type services or reactive services. There's really not much for preventative, especially when it comes to domestic violence. I don't think there is any. I'm trying to think back, at least when I was in school, maybe there's something now, but when I was growing up in school, there were not any classes, any adult who would really talk about the warning signs of what domestic violence looks like. And it's been, as people are more willing to talk about serious issues like this, there's things like dating violence. There's more attention brought to that now than there has been before. But the thing is being mistreated by a partner has been something that has always happened, and unfortunately is probably always going to happen. And I hope as a society, we are able to better prepare men and women, boys and girls, of the warning signs of what it looks like to be in a relationship with a perpetrator. I'm going to try my best not to use too pointing of terms, but when you're talking about something as serious as domestic violence, I feel these terms are important to use so people understand the severity of the situation. Sometimes when people hear of domestic violence, they don't understand it. And oftentimes people visualize, if you've never experienced or you've never known anyone to experience it, which honestly you likely have, they just maybe haven't felt comfortable to tell you. People who don't have a lot of experience with it themselves often will think of a stereotypical domestic violence relationship. They will think of a bruised and battered individual physically. A lot of people really don't take into account the emotional toll that even if there is physical violence, there's often like psychological violence, and sometimes there is only psychological. And I remember, I'm going to turn down my light just a little bit, it's kind of bright. I remember when I was working in one of the jobs I've had, one of the things that we would kind of investigate was not only DV, but a more specific form of domestic violence, which was referred to intimate partner DV. And that's when you are in a long-term relationship with someone and you are likely to be intimate with them. Those kinds of domestic violence relationships are extremely dangerous. They are all dangerous, but once it reaches a level of intimacy, whatever that is described by for your relationship, it can get escalated very quickly. Law enforcement, one of the more scary calls that they will respond to, they will always tell you, are domestic disputes, because you never know what you're walking into. You never know how bad it is, how long it's been happening, how violent the perpetrator is, what kind of weapons the perpetrator has, because oftentimes it can end up in fatalities happening. And that is the very harsh reality. And although that's the worst circumstance, there is all kinds of gray in the middle. And I don't think enough people feel comfortable talking about their stories of being in any kind of relationship that has this kind of dynamic. Because as a society, although we try to be there for survivors, survivors are still also stereotyped. They're still also questioned. They're still looked at kind of inquisitively. And that is because people don't understand what the power and control wheel looks like. People don't understand the position that survivors are put into and how the domestic violence wheel actually works. People get a general basis or information or knowledge and they think that they know, but more oftentimes than not, unless you've had actual training in this topic, you've experienced it, you're likely to maybe not 100% understand it. So I just wanted to provide some background, get some general information out there, some of my general thoughts out there. I'm going to go back and look through some of the comments and we can go ahead and get the discussion started. As always, please don't feel you have to provide any stories of your own. I've never been, well, I can talk about a few instances with my personal life that I have experienced before. Hey, JC, good to see you. Hey, Sweet Tea and family. Yeah, I understand for anyone that this is too triggering for to not participate tonight. I definitely understand that. No hard feelings. Frank asked what preventative services would look like, and I kind of touched on it briefly. I think a lot of it would be educating people and making everyone kind of at an appropriate age, so probably somewhere in high school, having it a part of the curriculum to teach what kind of attributes and warning signs to look out for when you start dating, when you start seriously dating, so you kind of can tell when there is a red flag. Yeah, leaving is the most dangerous time, Dina. You are absolutely correct. That's statistically proven that when someone is ready to leave and starts that process to leave, that it is oftentimes when things are escalated to the max. Jake's asked, she wonders how many men are victims of DV. Most don't admit it. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I have worked cases. I have known personally men who have been on the receiving end of domestic violence, and it goes every which way, but because of the stereotype of when domestic violence was first started being talked about as a society, it was always, excuse my terminology, but the battered woman. So society kept that in their mind as what domestic violence looked like. And that is kind of still held to a degree with some people. And it's also harder because years and years ago, it wasn't an issue. I mean, that's the truth of it. It used to not be an issue. And in some countries, it's still not a problem if a husband or a spouse is violent towards their spouse, if they've done something in their eyes as perceived wrong. Yes, abusers are extremely charming, convincing, and calculated. That's part of the power and control wheel. Hey, Nikki, good to see you. Hey, Megan. Yeah, domestic violence is way more common. I see a lot of you guys either talking about people you know or your own little, how many relationships you've been in or people that you know who have been in them. And it's a very real part of society and dating and marriage. And without being educated about it and like informed about it to know what it is, you can be in a relationship like that and honestly, if there's not physical violence, not even be aware that you are being manipulated and controlled. Those are the hardest cases I remember working, is when it is identified that this is going on and you have a survivor who has not even comprehended what has been going on and where they were until you seriously sat down and talked through all of the points. And as they're answering some of your questions, and the more questions you answer and the less control that they realize they have, the less freedom that they're realizing that they have, that their partner or significant other is holding over them. It's a very hard conversation to have. It's a very raw conversation to have. And if you ever are the one that someone gives this information to, that they're experiencing something like that, always try to like be understanding when anyone is being vulnerable and disclosing anything with you. If you feel that authorities need to be involved, have that conversation with them. Don't go behind their back, because it's not going to help the situation. Be transparent with them, but still support them. There are situations when it is that bad that the survivor maybe doesn't understand or doesn't see the whole totality of the situation. And it's a scary time. It's a scary time for anyone who's aware that it's happening, and for the survivor, especially if it is a situation where they haven't really identified that that is where what is going on in the relationship. Hey, Smiley Mama. I could see you feeling like, Catherine, that it's not spoken about at all. And, you know, probably to the average person, it's probably not spoken about at all, if at all, very little. You know, I know more about it and I have to try and, you know, pull back the fact on why I know about it. Let me see if I can pull up the power and control wheel. Let me see if I can find it. I wish I had the one that like I learned off of. There's so many different ones popping up here. I'm going to try and find a wheel, JC, and I'll pull it up on the screen and we can talk about it in just a moment. Yeah, Xylee, you bring up good questions. Never ask a survivor what took so long, why didn't you leave earlier. It's shaming the survivor. And what people don't understand is sometimes survivors are in a position that until they have everything lined up to secure their safety and potentially their children's safety, they can't escape. And that is a very harsh reality that a lot of society does not understand and they can't comprehend, because when you are in a full-blown domestic violent relationship and they have total power and control over everything, that person, that survivor oftentimes doesn't have access to money, doesn't have access to a vehicle, doesn't have access to phones even. I mean, that is how controlling some perpetrators are. Other perpetrators will allow people, their significant other, to have a cell phone, but every single thing that they do is tracked on that phone. So it is damn near impossible without someone being aware of the situation to really have intervention sometimes when it is that serious and that bad of a domestic violence situation. It does take intervention, whether it is from the survivor or the perpetrator doing something so bad that an agency becomes involved, or the survivor being able to confront and work on a plan secretively. It is all very, 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 very hard for the survivor, and most of society does not understand that. Hey, Dr. Addiction. Good to see you. Freedom, do you think abusers can change? Do you ever see relationships evolve out of an abusive one? I was never working with families long term to where I saw change happen. I'm not going to say that change can't happen, because it absolutely can, but it has to come from the perpetrator wanting and understanding to have the correct therapy, to go through all of you're pretty much reprogramming your thought process and how you treat people. And the sad reality is not every perpetrator wants to be different. Sometimes they don't see anything wrong with what they're doing, and they're going to continue doing it. Hey, Stina Marie, good to see you. Let me see. I may just grab a pretty basic one and we'll just look at it. Okay. Let's see. I just popped up on one that is a little bit, it's pretty basic. What you can do is in your own, I'm going to share my screen, but in your own time, if you're interested in doing more research or understanding this stuff better, is just to honestly do research on your own. So this is one for post-separation abuse. You can see that here. And it's talking about a couple of different types of abuse, but pretty much, as you see in the middle, is the power and control. So that is the perpetrator or abuser, whichever term you want to use. They are trying to enforce all of these things. So they can be emotionally and verbally abusive. They will use your children against you. They will try to pit your children against you. They will use your children as a pawn against you. They will isolate you from all of your family, friends, anyone. They will manipulate you into being totally isolated, whether that's with you and your children. In very, very severe cases, they will isolate mothers from their children, even in the same household. Economic abuse, they will restrict your finances. They won't give you an allowance. They will keep you on limited allowance. They will kind of isolate you to where you're typically not working and you're financially dependent on them, and then they start employing this economic aspect of it. They will intimidate you in a number of ways, all kinds of threats leading into they'll coerce you to do things that you probably wouldn't typically do. Then when you start to maybe fight back or push back, that's when they're going to start minimizing, blaming, and denying their behavior and making it the survivor's fault. It's your fault that this is happening. If you didn't do this, I wouldn't have to do this. They will use privileges. They will, if you have technology, like I said, they're going to track your stuff. They are likely to employ stalking. This is all stuff that happens during and after. During, it can be even worse. So when I am on, when I'm looking at that stuff, I don't have access to the full chat. So that is just a basic one. And like I said, you can always Google and find other ones, more. There's different power and control wheels for like everything. Because when you're in a domestic violence relationship, they often are employing these things. So this is, oh my gosh, this is just a standard power and control wheel. And the last one was like the post. But here is the power and control wheel. It's very, very much the same as the other one. It's just the pattern of behavior that perpetrators use over a survivor. So just for those who wanted to know what a power and control wheel looks like, that's a couple of them. You can always Google it, research it. There's plenty of articles and information out there to read, to become better aware, to become not only aware for like educational purposes, but for family and friends. You can kind of learn the warning signs and behaviors in more in-depth classes. As I was saying at the beginning of the live stream, there are almost every area has what would be considered that area's domestic violence safe shelters and things like that. And it's called different things depending on where you're at. When you call your hotline, they're going to get you in touch with your local area's domestic violence people, and you can call them just to get educational pamphlets. Oftentimes, they're going to be pamphlets for your local domestic violence safe places, not like the houses. The houses are never listed. It's super confidential, but they will provide you basic information in the pamphlets of like what kind of information is available. Statistical information is sometimes included in those. Yeah, everybody's relationship can be different. When I was younger, I was in a long-term relationship, and my parents did not like who this gentleman was. I dated him for several years. We lived together. This was when I was a young adult. And although he never treated me this way after the fact, like there were things within his character that were flawed, and that's okay. Clearly, I was willing to look past it at the time. He had a short fuse, and this doesn't mean that you're going to be a perpetrator by any means, but he had a lot of traits and warning signs that my parents had picked up on, and they would have private conversations with him. I didn't learn of this until after the relationship had been ended for quite a while, but he had one blow up, and he didn't touch me, but it was over an argument. I don't even remember now what we were arguing about, but we were arguing back and forth about something, and he was pretty muscular, and he had picked up and like torn apart several pieces of furniture. And that was like the biggest red flag for me. The relationship ended shortly after that. And then a few years later, my mom had told me that not only her, but also my father would talk to him when I wouldn't be around, or when I would go to the bathroom, and like have conversations with him about him never laying a hand on me. And if he had, there would be some serious consequences. I don't know what their actual conversations were looking like. That's just kind of what she told me. So I was lucky in that instance. I do know that that individual got married and was abusive to their spouse. I mean, I'm glad my parents had seen it and were willing to have conversations with him. I was naive and didn't think that it was going to happen until that blow up happened. And that happened at about like a year and a half, almost 2 years of us dating. Another instance that I personally had was I started to date this gentleman. I did not really know him. I think I was 21. I was of drinking age. And I mean, he was to the T someone who did not have good intentions. I have always been a pretty independent individual. And the process he was in, he was kind of not stable. So I allowed him to, live with me and my roommate. And I was catering to him. I was working. I was paying for everything for this person. And I was not treated very well. He was not nice to me. He was talking to other women, not bringing women to our house, but he was talking to other women. He was talking, kind of downplaying me, and talking poorly about me, which I just let roll off. And then one night he had gotten a little bit too intoxicated, and he thought it was a good idea to put his hands on me. I'm small. I think I've told you guys this before. I'm 5 foot. Back in the day, I was pretty fit. So I, barely broke 100 pounds, and I was really tiny. And this dude, after like a week of dating and me doing everything for him and him living with me for a week and me, working my butt off to be able to not only afford my bills, but to help him, thought it was a great idea to pick me up by my neck and push me up against a wall. I definitely am not somebody who's not gonna take that. And I understand if people can't or don't want to engage. I 100% engaged. I tried to call law enforcement, to which he responded with breaking my phone. And I responded with punching and scratching the shit out of his face until he put me down. And I had a friend at the time come and pick me up. And I got a new phone that night with that friend. And I reached out to this individual and I told them if they were in my house, in my apartment the next day, that I would be calling law enforcement and I would arrive with law enforcement. And he was gone. And I've never heard of him, never seen him. I was told by a mutual friend a couple months later that he had gone back to his hometown, which was way states away. So those were my 2 scenarios of being in a relationship with people with perpetrators. Although the first relationship was quite long, I didn't experience any of that until the very end. And then the second one, I didn't know that person. That was like the first time I've ever really dated somebody purely based off of appearance. He was a very good looking individual. Since then and before then, I had never dated somebody just based off of their physical appearance. And I definitely learned that it's not worth it from that very brief encounter. You know, it was a very interesting evening. Your doctor used a list and he asked me to identify your family's behavior and patterns and then ask if you recognized any of those traits in yourself. You don't think you'd have broken the cycle with this insight, to be honest. I mean, I don't know why the light's coming in on these blinds this evening. It's a little bit annoying. So, and my two scenarios are honestly some of the, and I'm not downplaying the situations I've been in or that I experienced, especially because one was physical, but that is nothing compared to what survivors in long-term relationships deal with, whether it's a physical or it's just emotional. And oftentimes, I don't know the statistic and I don't want to quickly pull one and it maybe be incorrect without me doing my research to make sure it's a valid statistic, but more often than not, abuse may not start off physical, but after prolonged periods of time of being with a perpetrator, it is likely to develop into physical violence when you're talking about partners. Grandparents, yeah. I mean, the elderly, everybody is capable of being a survivor of domestic violence. More often than not, conversations that are had, kind of like the one I've had tonight, have been pretty much around like partners, but domestic violence is called different things for different kinds of ways that it's being used. Like I said, dating violence earlier. There's different terms for it all, but any kind of relationship can result in domestic violence, whether it's familial, whether it is a relationship like a partner type relationship, whether it is a friendship. I mean, you can be involved with a perpetrator and then abusing you psychologically, physically, in a number of ways. Hey, Jersey, good to see you. Jakes, it just depends. I mean, honestly, most perpetrators who engage in this kind of behavior start off being extremely charming, extremely, like, they seem like the ideal partner, and they do that intentionally. That's not their true selves. They are putting on a front because they want you to, especially if it is like a partner situation, they want you to love them. They want you to feel that they're your person, and they can go on with that for however long they see fit to their power and control. And then once they feel that they have control and power over your love for them, that's when they start manipulating these other areas of your life. And it can happen quickly. It really just depends on the perpetrator and the survivor. That's why it's kind of important, in my opinion, to educate people and allow people to kind of be aware of this power and control wheel, because you may not always be able to identify or think of things like this wheel when you start dating somebody new, right? I'm going to try and shut this blind the other way so it's not shining light on my face. It's still doing it, huh? I think it may just be the time of day. Hopefully that got them to shut. So, sorry for the unprofessional little break there for a second. Let's see. So this is the power and control wheel that we've talked about. Let's see if we can pull up. Okay, so I don't know what this is going to pull us into. So I am at the hotline.org. These websites are full of stuff like this. That way, if you are a survivor and you're on one of these websites and your perpetrator comes in, you are able to quickly exit. But this website has the national number and you can chat. So if you have access to a phone and you want to try and phone, they have all of these. So let's see what they have as. It's a warning sign, just so you know. I'm not sure if it's going to bring up like an article. I was thinking it would bring up. So here is, it's just saying recognize the signs. And this is oftentimes domestic violence is going to be talked about in the sense of a relationship. Just try and think of relationship loosely. Oftentimes people think of partners, intimate partners, but anything that has an emotional attachment you can use this term. So it's not always easy to tell at the beginning of a relationship. Possessive and controlling behaviors don't appear overnight. So like if you're in a new relationship and they're constantly wanting to know where you're at, who you're with, why you're there, when you're going to come home, they're just constantly asking you what you're doing and not allowing you to have any time away from them or apart from them can be an early sign that they have some controlling tendencies. And that's, I mean, in like a severe, strong way. I mean, even my husband today, if I'm going somewhere, he typically asks me, where am I going? What am I doing? But he's doing that more to know where I'm at in case I don't come home. Once he knows and I tell him once, or oftentimes I just offer that information and I leave, I don't hear from him. He's not checking up on me constantly. He's not constantly berating me, feeling like, I'm doing something wrong because I'm out with a friend or with family. That's the kind of behaviors that will start to be observed. And as we've talked about, it's never going to look the same. It can look differently. So here are some common ones that they have put together, telling you that you're never doing anything right. So they're diminishing your capabilities. They're trying to diminish your self-esteem. This is in a ploy to make you rely on them. Showing extreme jealousy of friends or time spent away from them, preventing or discouraging you from spending time with friends, family members, or peers. Again, they're trying to isolate you. Insulting, demeaning, or shaming you, especially in front of other people. So they try to belittle you, embarrass you, make you feel less than so that they have that power over you. Controlling the finances in the household, pressuring you. This is one that we haven't talked about just because it is extremely triggering, and I don't know if we need to go down this rabbit hole tonight, but this is an important one. This kind of falls into intimate partner violence. That's more when you're dealing with intimacy, like bedroom intimacy, and that being forced upon you without consent. You still have to consent even if you're married. pressuring you to use drugs or alcohol, intimidating you through threatening looks or actions, insulting your parenting or threatening to harm or take away your children or pets, intimidating you with weapons, and destroying belongings in your home. These are all just warning signs. I mean, and the list could go on and on and on. These are just some of the more common ones. So just to give you guys a little bit more context. Yeah, emotional abuse is one that, because it's not identified physically, resources will still help you no matter what. Sometimes there's specifics and there may be like loopholes that you need to utilize. And I'm not trying to say that every system is perfect. I know for a fact systems are flawed, and sometimes you may be in a domestic violence situation where physical violence is not a key factor, or they're requiring certain things to have happened for you to receive services from that particular agency. It is hard to find services if they're not already willing to work with you, but I can almost guarantee there are services if you find yourself in this situation or any situation where you need help and you're comfortable reaching out to me. As I always offer, you are welcome to reach out to me, and I will do what I can to help you find services in your area that will help you with whatever it is that you need assistance with. You saw a TikTok by a police officer that reacts to 911 calls. A girl calls 911, pretends to order a pizza. Yep. I mean, that's something that's kind of been viral for a little while. I think it was several years ago, a survivor had ordered pizza from like Domino's or Pizza Hut, and in the notes put call 911. I mean, and it's happened on waitresses' tips and stuff like that. It's hard when survivors are in situations like that, it's hard if they have already been isolated from everyone. They're almost put in a position at times where they have to make these extreme measures to be able to do anything about it. I'm going to pull up the and if you ever see somebody, hopefully it actually, this sign right here, if you ever see somebody give you the sign or you see something questionable and you ask if they're okay and they give you this sign right here, call the authorities. They're asking for help. If you have somebody in public showing you that sign, they want help. They need help. Worst that's going to happen is if you misread a situation or you misunderstand a situation and authorities go out and make contact and it was a total misunderstanding. But I can promise you, if a survivor is to the point where they're publicly reaching out for help to this degree, you need to act fast, because that means that they are most likely scared that they're going to die. And I know that that sounds far-fetched, but it's true. They are that fearful of their perpetrator at this point in time that they are willing to publicly outcry for help. Let me make sure I share the screen so you can see what it looks like. Yeah, there's so that's the sign. If you see that in public, definitely call the authorities. If you're somewhere that has security forces, reach out to the security forces, let them be aware. Do what you can. Do what you can as a good citizen. Children are also taught this sign now. I see that that's kind of becoming a thing where children are aware that they can make that sign if they're in a situation where they don't want to be, like if they're being kidnapped or if they don't feel safe. They're being taught this kind of sign language. So always just be aware of your surroundings. You should do that anyways as an adult. I think it's something that people just aren't taught about, is how to be aware of what's going on around you. I feel like unless you have law enforcement or someone who's in EMS or firefighting or has done investigations of any kind, has worked with like populations that can be violent, you don't inherently try to pay attention to your surroundings, to know your exits, to know where your back is towards an entry or an exit, or what may be perceived as concerning behavior. Try, if you don't already employ these kinds of things, try to start employing them even when you're in public, because unfortunately, we are seeing more and more mass shootings. And if you don't know where you're at and you're not being aware of your surroundings, you may be somebody, who is just openly running because you haven't thought out of an exit plan. You haven't thought out of an exit strategy. I know that sounds paranoid, but working in investigations for DCF, anytime I park a certain way for fast exit and not being blocked in, I park a certain way. I only would know where all of my exits were, all of my entries. Anytime there was concerning situations, I would ensure my safety through other means. Being in that kind of work, you cannot carry a weapon on you. You cannot have a weapon in your vehicle. Even if you have a carry permit, you can't have it when you're working. You cannot have it in your vehicle. You cannot have a taser. You can't have a knife. You can't have anything when you're doing that kind of work. It is literally just you. So you have to be hyper vigilant and hyper aware of your situation and your surroundings to ensure your safety so you get home at the end of the day. My precaution was, if something was unsafe, I stepped out and I called law enforcement. I would have the conversation with the family if I felt that it was necessary. Typically, if you're doing your work right on the front end, you know ahead of time if it's going to be necessary or not. But always be aware of where you're at. Always be aware of your surroundings. And if I know it's kind of unfortunate now with technology that car keys are fobs and not an actual key. I know there's a key inside the fob, but what I mean is, like, one of the oldest defense mechanisms that I learned was to have your keys staggered in between your hands if you felt threatened or you felt you were going in an unsafe area to get to your vehicle. I'm hyper paranoid. Nothing really bad has happened to me in public, but I am, because of what I've seen, what I've been told, and what I have investigated, I'm overly cautious of my personal protection, not to the point where I don't carry with me, but I have to be very comfortable and familiar with my surroundings for me to go somewhere by myself. When we first moved here, I didn't go to our local Walmart or anything like that alone for like 2 months. I always had to have either my sister-in-law or my husband with me. I refused to go by myself because I didn't know the area, and I just didn't know what kind of area we were in. Now I'm comfortable here, and I know my way around the streets and things like that, so I feel more safe. But always have an exit strategy. Always be running some kind of scenario when you first enter a building or a place. It seems paranoid, but it could be the difference between you making it another day during a mass shooting. I mean, that sounds terrible, but that is the reality we live in. And as a society, we need to be okay to talk about it. Which, you know, anybody who does talk about stuff like this automatically gets limited ads. You can't openly monetize videos like this because for some reason YouTube doesn't want content like this on their platform, which is outrageous because to me this is more educational than it is allowing known what are people using now, PDF files on their platform. But I mean, that's the unfortunate state of the world, and it's crappy. But is there any do you guys have any questions or anything that you guys want to talk about, any scenarios you guys, hypothetical, non-hypotheticals? If not, that's totally fine. Nobody feel that you have to. I'm just throwing that out there. I feel like I've talked a lot. You have found at least 2 to 3 different ways to work in home because you've noticed you've had someone following you. And I'm glad you were aware enough that someone was following you. You honestly never know. No, Leanne, any kind of controversial topic cannot get monetized. Almost all of my open discussions I will try to monetize, except for a few that, and I've said I wasn't going to monetize those. But for the most part, if I try to even monetize it, it gets put on limited ads because it's technically against what's monetizable because it's serious real world issues and they don't want that to be talked about. It was back when you lived in Florida. Yeah, it's scary. I don't know if I'm going to do a video about it or not. I don't know if I've talked about it here. I've talked about it on my craft channel, especially today. I have kind of fallen into like watching more TikTok than YouTube lately, and I'm having a love-hate relationship with how readily accessible and monetizable their content is, because I've seen some things that probably should not be out in the public and things that I personally don't think should be happening, and they are. But then I see the benefit of some of the other information that's available on the platform. And it's just, I'm super conflicted about it. And I kind of want to do a video about it, just like talking to you guys about what I see. And I know if you watch TikTok, everybody's For You page is going to be different. It is kind of personalized to what kind of content you watch and things like that. But I kind of want to, like, a lot of my demographic is close to or around my age within like 10 to 15 years. So I would like to pose some questions about the app and about other people's experience with this app to see if it's just maybe mine that is like so controversial, because I've seen some things on that app and I'm like, how in the world is this on here? How is this okay? How is this being pushed out? And then I'll see something else and I'm like, okay, I really understand the positivity and like the good change that can come from this being out there and being monetized, unlike on this platform where this won't be monetized. Like, I can see that. I just don't know. Clearly, there's a reason I haven't tried to sit down to film it yet, because my thoughts are still kind of scattered all over the place. Would you say abuse goes from mild to worse, escalates, or sometimes start at the worst behaviors? I mean, it depends on how comfortable the perpetrator is with the survivor, I think. You notice, okay. I'm glad you said that you noticed the same thing. I'm probably going to film a video about it then. I just need to better collect my thoughts. You're not on there and you would like to know. Could you maybe talk about the complex emotional relationships people may have with their abusers? I guess some people often overstep because they assume survivors hate their abusers. I don't think I would be the appropriate person to have that conversation. If anybody in my audience wants to talk from their own experience about that, I'd be willing to do an open community discussion. I've talked about that before, where I wanted to start that series. I've had a few people interested in telling their stories or having me tell their stories, but none have come through and confirmed. So until that's confirmed, it's just going to be something that I will start once there's more interest in that. But seeing as I haven't been in that position, I don't think that I'm best equipped, because I can talk about statistical things. I can do statistical research all day long, but I feel like that sometimes can feel like a lecture to people, and they maybe won't pick up on everything. But not all survivors end up hating their abusers. Hey, Tutu Queen. So with that being said, I do think I'm going to go ahead and close out for the evening. As always, the resources are always going to stand. If you guys need to, are you in this situation, you can call the hotline that's listed. If you need other assistance, feel free to reach out to me. I am always open to helping identify resources for you if you need them. But it's been a pretty good conversation. I appreciate everybody who has talked about some of your own experiences. I know this is a touchy topic. I will try my best to think of some more lighthearted topics for Friday. So if you have any suggestions or you want to talk about anything, whether it's serious or not serious, leave it in the comments underneath this video, and I will refer to the comments before I post the poll next week. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good day, evening, or night, wherever you are. There will not be an upload tomorrow, but I should have an upload that I have hinted about and talked about coming on Wednesday, hopefully Wednesday, Thursday the latest, and I will keep you guys posted on social. But until then, I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.